Welcome. This is David Boles, Human Meme. Today's topic, how to adapt everything. In 2009, I wrote a bolesblogs.com article titled The Dying Artful Adaptation. And I want to expand on that idea a bit more now with you. But first, here's the general argument I was making way back then. The key to a successful and artful adaptation is to make yourself a slave to the master work. You do not become the work. The adapter must always remain an outsider. But you take your instruction and your mandate from the originating ideal. Few people are willing to give up their will and focus to something that must be greater than them, and that is where most adaptations fail. The will of the adapter overwhelms the intention of the original creator. The cautious and caring adapter must also be wary of simple regurgitation, where nothing changes and everything remains the same except the context of the original framing. When to change and when to remain the same is the largest task that fails most adaptations. We become tricked by the familiar, and we then fail in our job to honor the original intention by creating change that is unbelievable and revocable. The artful adaptation is about recreating and not creation. It is about shared honor, not independent overwhelming. It is about mesmerizing instead of trickery. I realize some of that may seem esoteric and generic, but the intention is the same. In order to adapt something, anything, say a poem into a play, a song into a sermon, a movie into a Broadway musical, small town folk into big city people, you must search for the singular binding truth of it all. That isn't an easy task. You have to be aware of meaning and minutiae and the original intent of the creator. What is hoping to be conveyed? How do I summarize this experience into another experience? You are searching for the essence of something. You are finding an aesthetic and celebrating it. You are getting down to the environmental DNA level to understand and dissect this thing you're after. Allow me to give you two examples that might make this process clearer. When I was in graduate school at Columbia University, in the city of New York, playwrights and directors were paired up with each other. Each week, a scene was written by the playwright and then cast and directed by the director. Now, it was an open secret that many of the directors did not like what many of the playwrights wrote, and they did not want to direct that particular scene. They were quickly and resoundingly corrected by our professor that was the job they were training for, to take something, anything, even if you don't like it, and find the essence of it for you to make it better. And if you cannot do that process, if you refuse to be involved, then you have failed in your craft as an artist. How do we do that?" the directors would wail and scream. And the directors were very calmly told something they did not want to hear or learn. "You make yourself a slave to the work, and let the work tell you what to do." Before you can change or move forward or find your own greatness, you must first submit to something else. The process, the essence of creation. Even if it starts with someone else, and even if it was first discovered long ago across many betrayals. Only some of the Columbia directors understood the lesson being taught, and they did okay. Most of the others just sort of went through the motions and the moves to get it over with, and that is precisely why there are so few really good directors working today in the professional theater. Excellent theater directors work today because they submit. Not their own work. They submit to the work. And then they work because they appreciate that process. They work because they have humbled themselves in the name of inspiration. They work because they have found that vital essence of something, and they have allowed the spark of the initial creation to touch them. The second adaptation example is found in the life of actor Stephen Hill. He was better than Brando. He died in August 2016. He was 94. Stephen Hill found his final fame on television in the show Law and Order, playing the district attorney. But many years before that, he was the original principal actor on Mission Impossible on CBS television in 1966. In 1966, Stephen Hill was unreligious, and then he happened to see a play about Sigmund Freud, and there was a line in the play about the Jews. And it was shouted from the stage, and it alarmed him. Stephen knew he was Jewish, but he didn't really know what that meant, and he didn't understand what all the yelling in the play was about and why. And so he found out. Stephen Hill adapted. Stephen Hill made his life an adaptation of one thing into another. And Stephen Hill became religious and an observant Jew. That meant he was unable to work from Friday sundown to sunset on Saturday. Television shows work every single day while in production. Stephen Hill refused. He tried to work with the Mission Impossible producers to maybe find a schedule that would fit his need and their need, and he could be finished with work early on Fridays. There's actually a great story that Stephen Hill would pray daily on the roof of the Mission Impossible soundstage. But sometimes he didn't have enough Jewish men from the cast with him to make a quorum. So he'd pick up the phone and call over to the Star Trek set that was filming in the same studio lot. And Stephen Hill would tell William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy, two good Jewish boys, to come on over to the Mission Impossible roof and pray with him. Now, neither Shatner or Nimoy were observant Jews. They worked every day, but they often joined Stephen on the roof and they all prayed together as one. Ultimately, Stephen Hill left or was fired from the original Mission Impossible television show because in his newfound appreciation for Judaism, he was unable to work the strict production schedule of the show. How many of the rest of us would give up our labor and our days for something greater than a paycheck and fame? Stephen Hill did not work regularly in film or television for many years after that. Getting kicked off a hit show because you refused to work certain days of the week was pretty much a recipe for getting blackballed. Sure, Stephen Hill did some regional theater, but it wasn't until his re-emergence on TV in Law and Order that Stephen Hill found his home and was finally able to take his place in a dramatic life that he earned and owned. And the producers of Law and Order knew Stephen was an observant Jew before they hired him. They knew his Mission Impossible history, and they worked around his religious schedule, and he made that show immensely better by being its star. Some in the entertainment industry feel Stephen Hill was the greatest actor of his generation, greater even than Marlon Brando. And they also feel that Stephen Hill threw away half of his life and all of his talent for the Torah. And they pity him, and they pray against his foolishness so that it may not visit them. But Stephen Hill knew. Stephen Hill knew what others around him failed to see. Stephen Hill knew he was called to, adapted into, another, different, higher calling than what he'd previously known. Adaptation is about discovering the essence of something and making something new of it. But sometimes, if you are right-hearted and just lucky enough, the essence will find you first and transform you instead. Thank you for listening. Be a human meme.